Hello and welcome everyone to the Polity Primer series of Drishti IAS. My name is Pragya and today we are going to discuss a very important topic that is in news recently. The title of our today's discussion is Special Session of the Parliament. In this discussion, we will study about the settings of the Parliament or the sessions of the Parliament. We'll also see what does the Constitution say in this regard or the constitutional provisions regarding it. We'll also see how often do our Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha meet. We'll also see what is a special session of the Parliament, and we are also going to analyze some special sessions of the Parliament that have happened since independence, and in the end we are going to see a practice question for your prelims examination and a practice question for your mains examination. Now let us proceed to see the background of our today's discussion. It has recently been announced by the Union Minister for Parliamentary Affairs that the Parliament is going to conduct a special session from September 18 to September 22 to discuss some of the important items. It is speculated that the most important bills such as the One Nation One Election bill, for which the Parliament has also constituted a committee, might be discussed and brought in this special session of the Parliament, although the government is very tight-lipped about its agenda. So in this discussion, we are going to study the meaning of the sittings of the Parliament or the sessions of the Parliament. We are also going to see what are special sessions of the Parliament. We will also see what does our Indian Constitution says in this regard. So now let us understand the meaning of this term, sittings of the Parliament or the sessions of the Parliament. If we talk about the meaning of this term, sittings of the Parliament or the sessions of the Parliament, in very layman terms, it means meetings of the Parliament. You know, our Indian Parliament meets thrice a year to discuss important business, to pay attention to the important topics which are going in the country, to conduct its regular business. So for all of these things, all of these discussions, the Indian Parliament requires to meet. The Indian Parliament meets thrice in a year. That is, the first is the budget session. Then is the monsoon session. And then is the winter session. So by conducting this business and by meeting regularly, the Parliament is able to discuss whatever topics of public importance that is going on in the country, and it also conducts its regular business during these sessions. So who decides the duration or the timetable for these sessions? Currently, it is completely the prerogative of the government to decide the duration or the timetable of these sessions. There is no strict timetable for the sittings of the Parliament. So what happened in 1955 was a Lok Sabha committee was constituted and it chalked out the exact calendar dates in which these sessions should be conducted. So for example, for the budget session, it suggested that it should be conducted from Feb 1 to May 7. For monsoon session, it said that it could be conducted from July 15 to September 15. For winter session, it recommended conducting the session from November 5 or 4 days after the Diwali holidays, whichever is later, to December 22. So these were the exact calendar dates that were recommended by this committee to the government for conducting these sessions. The government accepted them, but still they have not been implemented. So sadly, they have not been implemented as of now. So as I was discussing before, that who decides the duration and the timetable for these sessions? The government determines the date and duration of the parliamentary sessions. So I was explaining this before also, that it is the complete prerogative of the government. The Committee on Parliamentary Affairs takes the decision on the behalf of the government, and then the decision is communicated to the President of India, who then summons the houses of the Parliament. So under which article does the President has the power to summon the houses of the Parliament? It is under Article 85 of our Indian Constitution, which talks about the sessions of the Parliament, the summons of the Houses, the dissolution of the Houses and the prorogation of the Houses. So it mentions three terms. First is the summoning of the Houses, then there is dissolution of the Houses, and then there is prorogation of the Houses. And all of these three are the prerogative of the Indian President, and the power lies in the hands of the President. Now let us discuss the constitutional provisions in this regard in conduction of the sittings of the Parliament. So our Indian Constitution in explicit terms mentions that the maximum gap between the two parliamentary sessions cannot exceed the time frame of 6 months. Kindly note this 6 months duration, as it can be asked in your prelims examination. A question can be formed in the statement form, and the first statement could be that the maximum gap between two parliamentary sessions can be 6 months or 12 months, and they will try to confuse you. But as per our Indian Constitution, it is 6 months. And where is it mentioned in our Indian Constitution? It is mentioned in Article 85 Clause 1 of our Indian Constitution. Article 85 Clause 1 of the Indian Constitution talks about that the maximum gap between two parliamentary sessions cannot be more than 6 months. That means the Parliament has to meet, conduct its session after every 6 months. And the duration between two parliamentary sessions is known as the recess period. So, as most of the provisions of our Indian Constitution have a colonial past, so this provision was also borrowed from the Government of India Act of 1935. So, what happened was, under the Government of India Act, the British governor had the power to call the sessions for the Parliament to sit within a time span of 12 months. But when our Indian Constitution was formed, this provision was heavily discussed on the floor of the Constituent Assembly, and they decided that the maximum duration should be 6 months. That means the Parliament should meet after every 6 months. It was also suggested that the Parliament should have year-long sessions, as we had foreign precedents regarding this, that the Parliament of US, UK and other countries such as Canada, Germany met for longer durations, or they are in session for all around the year. So this was also suggested for the Indian Parliament, but this proposal was not accepted by the chairman of the drafting commissions, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. As per his opinion, he believed in regular parliamentary sessions and rejected proposals for year-round or longer sessions to prevent fatigue amongst the legislators. So, it was the opinion of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar that if we'll keep Indian Parliament in session throughout the year, it might lead to the fatigue in the legislatures. They'll always be busy. So that is why he allowed a time period between two sessions, so that they can come with fresh energy and they can discuss another important agendas, and they can be well prepared for the next session. So this was all about the time duration of the parliamentary sessions and the constitutional provisions regarding it. Now let us discuss how often do our Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha meet. So if we talk about before independence scenario, so before independence there was this Central Assembly, which is now known as the Parliament. So it met for a little more than 60 days a year. So the average duration of the meeting of Central Assembly, that was the predecessor of our Indian Parliament, was 60 days a year. When we got independence, this increased to 120 days a year in the first 20 years after independence. But if you talk about the current scenario, the number of the working days of the Indian Parliament has gradually decreased from 2002 to 2021. The average working day of Indian Parliament was only 67 days. If you talk about 2023, that is the current years. So in the current year, the Parliament has only worked for 42 days. If you talk about the state legislative assemblies, they even have a lesser number of working days. So in 2022, the state legislative assemblies average number of working days were only 28 days. So as I was discussing this before also, that slowly and gradually this number of working days of the Indian Parliament and the state legislative assemblies are decreasing. And what happens due to this? That the business is conducted in a very haphazard manner. If a bill has to be passed, it will be passed without any fruitful discussion. The opposition will not be allowed to question the bill. For a bill to pass, it has to be discussed at 3 stages. So in these 3 stages, if the number of working duration of the Indian Parliament is less, definitely the discussions are going to be hampered. So what happens is, the bill is, if the ruling party has a majority, the bill is passed in a very haphazard manner due to the decrease in the number of working days of the Indian Parliament. It was also suggested when our Indian Constitution was being formed, it was also suggested to the Constituent Assembly and by the members of Constituent Assemblies that the Parliament should meet for more than 100 days in a year so as to conduct their business efficiently and effectively. But this suggestion has not been accepted in the Constituent Assembly. On multiple occasions, the Conference of Presiding Officers has recommended that the Parliament should meet for more than 100 days. So the Committee for Presiding Officers has also suggested the same thing, that to increase the efficiency of the Parliament, working of the Parliament should meet for more than 100 days a year. But it is still at the recommendation stage and the government has not accepted it. There have been a number of private member bills in this regard tabled on the floor of the Houses of Parliament. So what happened was, former Rajya Sabha MP Naresh Gujral in his 2017 private member bill. So what is a private member bill? It is a bill that is being presented by a person who though is a minister but is not a part of the Council of Ministers. So that is known as a private member bill. So many private member bills have been tabled in both the houses of the Parliament, as I was discussing before, regarding increasing the number of days of the Parliament. The bill suggested that the Parliament should meet for 4 sessions in a year. So this bill makes a shift in the approach for the sessions of the Parliament and suggested that instead of having just 3 sessions, the Parliament rather should have 4 sessions, including a special session of 15 days for debating matters of urgent public importance. So 15 days special session should also be there to discuss the urgent public importance matters that are going on in the country. Let me explain you this with a recent example. For example, on the Manipur issue, we have heard in the news that the Parliament got adjourned. It could not be discussed. Although there was a no confidence motion also against the ruling party on this issue, but the issue could not be discussed at a great length as it should have been. So that is why this private member bill suggested that we should also have a special session of the Parliament for 15 days to discuss the matters of urgent public importance. If the 1955 recommendations of the Lok Sabha committee were accepted, Parliament would be in sessions for 8 months around the year. So, if the recommendations, I was discussing this before also, that the government agreed but it did not implement the recommendations of the Lok Sabha committee that were made in 1955. So, if these recommendations were accepted by the government, the Parliament would be in session for 8 months in a year. And that would be very significant to discuss, to have a conduct the business properly, to have the maximum output from these sessions. But this is not happening and the number of the working days of the Indian Parliament has significantly decreased. Now let us understand about the special session of the Parliament, and we'll also see that whether our Indian Constitution mentions about this or not. So if we talk about the special session of the Parliament, our Indian Constitution does not mention this word, special session of the Parliament. Though we'll be studying in our further slide that Article 352 mentions the term special sitting of the House. But if you talk about this term special session of the House, it is not explicitly mentioned in our Indian Constitution. So what do we understand by this term, special session of the parliament, in simple terms? So if I talk about this, the meaning of this term in a very layman language, the term sometimes refers to the sessions of the government that have been convened for special occasions like commemorating parliamentary or national milestones. So if we want to celebrate something, if we want to historically remember something, if we want to commemorate our national or historical milestones, a special session can be convened. So who has the power to call this or summon this special session of the parliament? If we talk about the summoning, the president has the power under Article 85. So this is summoned as a regular session by the president by exercising his powers under Article 85 of our Indian Constitution. If we say that who chairs the special session of the parliament, so in the case of Rajya Sabha, it is the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, and in the case of Lok Sabha, it is the speaker of the Lok Sabha who chairs these special sessions of the Indian Parliament. The presiding officers can also direct that the proceedings of their respective houses would be limited. So this is what differentiates a special session of the parliament from the regular session of the parliament, that the conduct of the proceedings of the house can be limited by the presiding officers. It can only be on the question that on the agenda that this session has been called by the parliament. Only that agenda or that question or that matter of public importance could be discussed in this session, and the parliament is not conducting any regular business in this session. And some of the important parliamentary devices such as the question hour, zero hour, etc. are also not available during the special session of the parliament, and this is a distinguishing factor of this special session of the parliament from the regular session of the parliament. So as I was explaining this before also, that Article 352 of our Indian Constitution, which talks about the proclamation of national emergency, does mention this term special setting of the house. So we have had a very historical past regarding the misuse of the emergency provisions, and to lay down the safeguards and to lay down the check and balance upon the use of this proclamation of emergency provisions, 44th Constitutional Amendment Act 1978 added the part related to the special setting to add safeguards to the power of proclamation of emergency in the country. So this is what I was explaining, that this power has been misused in the past, and that is why this important safeguard regarding calling of the special sitting of the house has been laid by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act in Article 352 of our Indian Constitution. And what does it states? It states that if a proclamation of emergency is issued and the parliament is not in session, kindly note that the parliament is not in session, then what can happen is 1/10 of the Lok Sabha MPs can ask the president to convene a special meeting or the special sitting of the house, and in this meeting or session they are going to discuss that whether they want to continue with the emergency or whether they want to revoke it. So if the emergency has to be revoked, 1/10 of the Lok Sabha MPs can write to the president and call a special sitting of the house, in which they will be discussing that whether emergency should be continued or should be revoked. So this is also a kind of safeguard against the misuse of the power of proclamation of emergency. Now let us understand and talk about the special sessions that have happened since our independence. So they can be divided into two parts: special sessions with debates and the midnight special sessions. If we talk about the very first special session of the parliament, it was convened in 1947 to commemorate India's independence. So to celebrate India's independence, this first very special session of the parliament was called on the in 1947. As I was discussing before also, that the special sessions can be called to celebrate some of the important milestones. So this was the very first special session. Then in 1962, to discuss the incursion made by the China at length while the war was still on. So in 1962, we were having the crisis of Indo-China war, and the China was quickly progressing. So to assess the situation, this special session was called by the then Prime Minister of India. Then 1997, a midnight session was convened to mark 50 years of India's independence. So as I was explaining that to celebrate important milestones, we can call a special session of the parliament, and in 1997, a midnight session was called to celebrate 50 years of our independence. Then in 1972, it was called to mark the silver jubilee of the India's independence. So in 1972 also, it was called to mark the silver jubilee of the India's independence. Then in 1992, it was called to mark the 50th anniversary of the Quit India movement. Then in 2015, it was called as a part of the year-long celebrations to pay respect to the architect of our Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. So to pay our respects to him, we called a special session of the parliament as a part of the celebrations that were going on at that point of time. Then it was called as recently as in 2017 to discuss, it was also a midnight session, and it was called to discuss the implementation of the GST regime in India. So these are the special sessions that have happened since independence. Let us discuss some more of them, like the Lok Sabha special sitting of the Lok Sabha in 2012. It was to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the first sitting of the Indian Parliament. So I have explained this before also, that the first sitting of the Indian Parliament happened, and in 2012 a special sitting was called to celebrate it. Then special sitting in Rajya Sabha. It was organized in 1977 and 1991 when the Lok Sabha was under dissolution to decide on the President's rule. Then in 2023 special session, though we don't know the agenda of this session, why is it being called, we speculate that it has some important legislative business. The parliament has important legislative business to conduct, and that is why it is being called. But the government is very tight-lipped on the agenda for this special session, so we cannot comment on why is it being called. All of these remain mere speculations. We'll see when the special session is happening from September 18 to September 22, that what exactly will happen in this special session, or we'll find out if the government speaks about its agenda. So this was all about the special sessions that have been conducted since independence. With this, we come to a conclusion of our today's discussion. We have seen what are sessions of the parliament or sittings of the parliament. We have also understood the constitutional provisions in this regard. We have also seen the special sessions of the parliament. We have also understood what are special sessions of the Indian Parliament, and we have also seen some of the important special sessions of the Indian Parliament that have been called since independence. Now let us see a practice question for your prelims examination. So the question is, consider the following statements. Statement number 1, the term special session is mentioned in the Indian Constitution. Your statement number 2 is, the decision to call a special session of the parliament is taken by the Parliamentary Affairs Committee. Your statement number 3 is, the special session is summoned by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. Which of the following statements given above are correct? Your option are: option A, 1 only, option B, 1 and 2 only, option 3, 2 and 3 only, and option D, 1, 2 and 3. Kindly drop your answer in the comments box below. Now let us understand and see and discuss a practice question for your mains examination. So the question is, discuss the importance of special session of the parliament as an extraordinary device. So let us discuss the approach to attempt this question in your mains answer writing practice. So introduction, you can write about the sittings of the parliaments. You can also mention the constitutional provisions in this regard, as I have discussed in my lecture today. And you can also write about the special sessions of the parliament. You can also make a distinction between a regular session of the parliament and the special session of the parliament. And you can also cite the examples like I have cited in my discussion today regarding the special sessions that have been convened since independence. Then you can conclude that they are very different from the regular sessions because the working of the House is limited to the agenda for which this special session has been called, and important parliamentary devices such as the question hour and 0 hour etc. are not available in this session. So this is how you can attempt this mains answer writing question for your practice. I hope this session was insightful for you. If you have any feedback regarding the session, kindly drop it in the comment box below. If you find the today's discussion helpful, kindly like the video and subscribe to our channel for more such updates. Thank you.